A determined little girl scavenges through junk and faces the world to save her sick mother, while a reclusive and indifferent millionaire observes from afar, trapped in his bubble of luxury and apathy. When their paths cross, what begins as a casual encounter transforms into a journey of transformation, courage, and redemption. The story reveals that sometimes in a child's struggle and the power of love, one finds the true meaning of life. The sun had barely risen when Emily woke up on that June morning. Her small bare feet touched the cold floor of the simple room she shared with her mother, Sarah, in the suburbs of Chicago. At just 9 years old, Emily already carried a responsibility greater than any child should have on her shoulders. She quietly approached the bed where her mother slept, observing her labored breathing. Sarah, at 35, was battling a rare autoimmune disease that had prevented her from working for almost 6 months. The family's savings, earned during years of work as a seamstress, were running out. "Mom," Emily whispered, adjusting the blanket. "Over, Sarah. I'm going to make your tea." In the small kitchen, Emily climbed on a stool to reach the cupboard. Her thin fingers grasped the last box of chamomile tea, a gift from Mrs. Johnson, the neighbor who always helped when she could. The steam from the hot water fogged up the kitchen window, through which the gray sky, typical of Chicago winters, could be seen. "Emily, my love," Sarah's weak voice came from the bedroom. "You didn't have to wake up so early." Emily entered the room carefully, carrying the cup. "But I want to, Mom. You need to take your medicine on time." Sarah tried to sit up in bed, but a wave of dizziness made her lie back down. Emily quickly placed the cup on the bedside table and helped her mother get comfortable, piling pillows behind her. "My little warrior," Sarah smiled weakly, caressing her daughter's dark curly hair. "You shouldn't have to do all this." Emily sat on the edge of the bed, watching attentively as her mother sipped the tea in small gulps. On the table beside her, the last pills of the treatment were organized in a plastic box with compartments marked with the days of the week. Only 3 days of medication remained. "Mum, it's Saturday," Emily commented, trying to sound casual. "Can I go play outside?" Sarah knew that tone of voice well. Her daughter was never one to play outside. She was a quiet girl who preferred to draw and read the few books they had at home. "Emily," Sarah began, but was interrupted by a strong cough. "Please, Mom," Emily insisted, her brown eyes shining with determination. "Mrs. Johnson said she'd keep an eye on me from her window, and I promised not to go far." What Sarah didn't know was that Emily had a plan. 2 weeks ago, the girl had discovered that she could collect cans and cardboard to sell at Mr. Thompson's junkyard, 3 blocks down. She kept every penny under her mattress, dreaming of getting enough money to buy the medicine her mother so desperately needed. "All right," Sarah relented after a long moment of hesitation, "but stay where Mrs. Johnson can see you and come back before lunch." Emily hugged her mother carefully, feeling her fragile body in her small arms. "I promise I'll behave, Mum. You rest, okay?" Leaving the room, Emily picked up her already empty school backpack, hidden behind the door. She had studied the neighborhood in the last few days and knew exactly where to find more recyclable materials. Near the commercial buildings on Michigan Avenue, where the bins were full on weekends. What Emily didn't imagine was that her little adventure would lead her to an encounter with someone who would completely change the course of her story. Michael Harrison, the owner of one of the largest technology companies in the country, was about to cross her path. The man everyone knew for his coldness and indifference would find, on that Saturday morning, something that would make him question all his values. As Emily carefully closed the front gate, the sky was beginning to clear. In her pocket was the money she had already collected, $47.50. It wasn't much, but to her it represented hope. Her small, determined steps led her towards the avenue, not knowing that this day would mark the beginning of a transformation, not only in her life but in everyone around her. "Today will be different," Emily muttered to herself, tightening her backpack strap. "Today I'm going to make it." The cold morning wind ruffled her hair as she walked, carrying in her heart a mission that seemed impossible for a child her age. But Emily was no ordinary child. In her eyes shone a determination that few adults possessed, a strength born from the need to protect the one person she loved most in the world. Michael Harrison observed the city awakening through the tinted glass windows of his office on the 30th floor. At 45, he had built a technological empire that had made him one of the most successful businessmen in the country. But on that Saturday morning, not even the privileged view of Michigan Avenue could improve his mood. "The numbers for the last quarter, sir," his assistant Rachel entered the room carrying a folder. Even on a Saturday, at 7 a.m., she maintained an impeccable posture, as if each day were a battle to be won with perfection. Michael ran his hand through the grey hair at his temples, a habit that betrayed his irritation. "Leave it on the desk," he replied without taking his eyes off the window. His mind was far away, trapped in memories he tried unsuccessfully to bury in the past. "One more thing." Rachel hesitated at the door. "Your sister called again. She insists she needs to talk to you about your niece's birthday. Tell her I'm busy." His voice came out harsher than he intended, as I've always been for the last 15 years. Rachel nodded discreetly and left, closing the door without making a sound. She knew that tone well. It was the same one Michael used whenever something made him remember Laura, his ex-wife, who had left him after years of exclusive dedication to work. From the height of his office, Michael noticed a small movement near the building's recycling bins. A child was rummaging through the containers with methodical determination. Something about that scene deeply bothered him. "Security," he pressed the intercom. "There's a miner going through the building's trash. Have her removed immediately." He turned his attention back to the reports, but his eyes kept returning to the window. The girl was now carefully separating cans and cardboard, storing them in a worn school backpack. There was something about her movements that conveyed not desperation but purpose. The security guard approached her, and Michael expected to see the usual scene, the child running away scared. But that's not what happened. She remained firm, gesturing and apparently arguing with the man. Intrigued, Michael took the panoramic elevator to the ground floor. "But I need to, mister." The childish voice reached his ears as soon as the doors opened. "Just today. I promise I'll leave everything organized afterward." "I'm sorry, little one, but those are the rules." The security guard tried to sound firm, but his voice betrayed a certain embarrassment. Michael approached silently, observing the scene. The girl appeared to be no more than 9 or 10 years old. Her worn shoes and simple clothes, although clean and well cared for, betrayed her humble condition. But it was her eyes that captured Michael's attention. There was a mixture of determination and pleading in them that reminded him of himself decades ago. "What's the problem here?" His deep voice surprised them both. "Mr. Harrison," the security guard straightened his posture. I just want the cans and cardboard, sir," the girl interrupted, turning to Michael without showing any intimidation. "I promise not to make a mess. It's important." Michael studied her face for a moment. There was no trace of manipulation in her voice, just a raw honesty he hadn't encountered in years in his meetings with executives and investors. "What's your name?" he asked, instinctively softening his tone. "Emily," she replied, tightening her backpack strap. "Are you the owner here?" Michael nodded, surprised by the girl's poise. "And why is it so important for you to collect this material, Emily?" A flash of hesitation crossed her face. "It's to help my mom," she finally answered, lowering her eyes. "For the first time. She's sick and, well, I need to do something." Something about the simplicity of that answer hit Michael like a punch to the stomach. He remembered his own mother, how she sold candy at their front door to support her children after their father abandoned them, of the promise he made to himself, that he would never again be powerless in the face of difficulties. "Richard," he addressed the security guard, "help Emily separate the recyclable material and provide water and something for her to eat." "No need, sir," Emily hurried to say. "I just want the cans. I can't take too long. I promised my mum I'd be back soon." Michael felt something awaken inside him, a curiosity he hadn't experienced in a long time. This child, with her dignity and determination, represented a puzzle that he suddenly found himself compelled to unravel. "Then at least let me make sure you take the most valuable material," he offered, surprising himself. "I'm sure we have. More aluminum cans in the cafeteria area." Emily hesitated, her eyes studying Michael's face as if trying to assess his true intentions. Finally, a small smile lit up her face. "Thank you, sir," she replied, following him towards the elevator. Michael didn't know it, but that moment would mark the beginning of a journey that would force him to confront not only his past, but also the man he had become. As they rode up in the panoramic elevator, he observed through the glass reflection Emily's amazed face at the view of the city. In her eyes there was something he had lost a long time ago: hope. In the cafeteria on the 30th floor, Emily watched in fascination as the imported coffee machine, while Michael instructed Rachel to gather all the cans and recyclable materials from the floor. The contrast between the luxury of the environment and the simplicity of the girl did not go unnoticed by the assistant, who cast curious glances at the unusual scene. "Would you like some hot chocolate?" Michael offered, surprising Rachel with his gentle tone, so different from his usual coldness. Emily hesitated. "I need to save time, sir. My mom—" "Just one chocolate," Michael insisted, something in his voice sounding almost paternal. While Rachel gathers the material, the girl eventually gave in, her eyes shining as she received the steaming mug. Michael noticed that her small hands were slightly scratched, probably from working with the cans. "How long has your mum been sick?" he asked, sitting across from her. Emily blew on the chocolate before answering. "It's been 6 months. She was a seamstress. She made beautiful dresses." Her eyes gained a special sparkle when talking about her mother. "But now she can't work anymore because of the pain. And your father?" Michael asked, although he already suspected the answer. "I never knew him," Emily replied simply. "But it's okay. My mom has always been both father and mother to me." Rachel returned with 3 bags full of cans and cardboard. "I've separated all the recyclable material from the floor, Mr. Harrison." Emily got up excitedly, but Michael noticed that she had barely touched the chocolate. "How much do you usually get per day, Emily?" "About $15 when I'm lucky," she replied, starting to organize the material in the bags. "At Mr. Thompson's junkyard, he always pays fairly." Michael did a quick mental calculation. $15 a day would barely buy bread. "And how much does your mum's medicine cost?" Emily's smile disappeared. "Almost $800. I've already saved $47.50, she quickly added, as if wanting to prove she was trying hard. Michael felt something tighten in his chest. Here was a 9-year-old child, trying to accomplish a nearly impossible task without losing hope. "Rachel," he called his assistant, "please arrange a car to take Emily and the material." "No need, sir," Emily protested. "I always walk anyway." "There are too many bags for you to carry alone," Michael argued, "and it's cold outside." Rachel left to arrange the transportation, leaving the two alone again. Emily nervously fidgeted with her backpack strap. "Can I ask you a question, Emily?" Michael leaned in slightly. "Why don't you ask someone for help? There must be some social program, some institution." "My mom already tried," Emily replied, her voice small but firm. "But they said her medicine is very specific, that it needed processes and papers. And she's getting worse." Her voice faltered slightly. "I can't wait." Michael felt transported to his own childhood, to the nights when he saw his mother cry in secret for not being able to buy the medicine his younger brother needed. The difference is that now he had the power to do something. "Emily," he called softly, "what if I could help?" The girl's eyes widened with distrust. "You don't even know us." "Sometimes we don't need to know someone to know it's the right thing to do," he replied, surprised by his own words. Emily was silent for a moment, as if weighing something important. "My mom always says we shouldn't accept help from strangers." "Your mom is a wise woman," Michael smiled. "Why don't you let me meet her? That way we won't be strangers anymore." Rachel returned at that moment, informing that the car was ready. Emily looked at the bags, then at Michael, and then at her own hands. "Do you promise you're not one of those who just want to appear on TV helping others?" she asked with disconcerting honesty. Michael couldn't contain a laugh, the first in a long time. "I promise. Actually, I prefer to stay away from cameras." "Then," Emily bit her lip, thoughtful, "could you come to our house now? It's just, there's only medicine left for 3 more days." The vulnerability in that confession hit Michael deeply. Here was a child carrying a weight that no adult should carry, let alone a 9-year-old girl. "Of course," he replied, grabbing his coat. "Rachel, cancel my morning appointments." "But sir, the meeting with the investors—" "Can wait," Michael interrupted her, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Some things are more important." As they descended in the elevator, Michael observed Emily hugging one of the bags, her eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and apprehension. He couldn't explain it, but he felt that this Saturday morning was about to change much more than just the life of that small family. The black car Michael drove stood out completely from the narrow street in the suburb where Emily lived. Children, playing on the sidewalk, stopped to watch as the vehicle parked in front of the simple house with peeling walls, yet well maintained, with small flower pots in the window. "It's here," Emily announced, already jumping out of the back seat. "Mrs. Johnson!" She waved to a lady who was curiously observing from the neighboring house's window. Michael got out of the car, instinctively adjusting his tie. The driver began to remove the bags from the trunk, but Emily quickly intervened. "You can leave the bags in the car, please," she asked, surprising Michael. "I need to explain everything to my mom first." There was a disconcerting maturity in the way she handled the situation. Michael nodded, instructing the driver to wait. "Mom?" Emily called as she opened the door. "I brought a visitor." Sarah was sitting in a worn armchair in the small living room, an old book in her lap. Despite the illness evident in her fragile appearance, there was a dignity in her bearing that immediately impressed Michael. "Emily, who is—" Sarah began, but her voice failed when she saw the elegantly dressed man accompanying her daughter. "Good afternoon, ma'am." Michael stepped forward. "I'm Michael Harrison. I met your daughter today and—" "Harrison?" Sarah interrupted, her eyes widening in recognition. "From Harrison Tech?" Michael nodded, surprised. Sarah tried to stand up, but her legs weakened. Emily ran to support her. "Mom, calm down," Emily whispered. "Let me explain. I was looking for cans near his building and—" "Emily!" Sarah exclaimed, horrified. "I thought you were playing in the street. You promised me—" "But Mom, I had to do something," Emily protested, tears starting to form in her eyes. "The medicine is running out and—" Michael observed the scene, feeling simultaneously intrusive and involved. There was something familiar about that exchange, something that reminded him of his own mother. "Mrs. Sarah," he intervened gently, "your daughter didn't do anything wrong. In fact, she taught me a lesson today." Sarah sat back down, exhausted by the effort. Her face showed a mixture of concern and embarrassment. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison," she began. "I don't know what to say. Emily shouldn't have bothered you." "On the contrary," Michael replied, sitting in the chair Emily offered him. "Your daughter made me remember something I had forgotten a long time ago." It was then that Michael noticed the carefully folded fabrics in a corner of the room, the sewing machine covered with a cloth, the neatly stacked fashion magazines, small signs of a life interrupted by illness. "You were a seamstress, weren't you?" he asked, although Emily had already mentioned it. "Yes," Sarah replied, a momentary sparkle lighting up her tired eyes. "I worked for some boutiques in the Gold Coast area until—" She didn't complete the sentence, but it wasn't necessary. The purplish spots on her arms, the difficulty in moving, everything spoke of the disease that was consuming her. "Mom," Emily approached, holding Sarah's hand. "Mr. Harrison wants to help us. He's different, I know he is." Sarah looked at her daughter, then at Michael. Years of struggle had taught her to be cautious with offers of help. "Mr. Harrison, I appreciate your kindness, but—" "Please," Michael gently interrupted her. "Call me Michael. And before you say no, allow me to explain." He then told them about his own childhood, about his mother who sold candy, about the brother who needed expensive medicine. He talked about how he promised himself that one day he would be able to help people in similar situations. "In recent years," he admitted, "I lost sight of that purpose. I became so focused on building wealth that I forgot why I started. Your daughter made me remember." Emily, who had sat on the arm of her mother's armchair, listened to everything attentively. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on her own hands, which trembled slightly. "What exactly are you proposing?" she finally asked. "First, to ensure that you have access to proper treatment," Michael responded. I have contacts at the best hospitals in the city. Then, when you're better, maybe we can think about resuming your work with sewing." Sarah raised her eyes, surprised. "How do you know that I—" "The fabrics," Michael smiled. "And Emily told me about the beautiful dresses you used to make." A silent tear rolled down Sarah's face. Emily hugged her mother immediately. "Mom, please," she pleaded softly. "Let him help." Michael observed the scene, feeling something awaken in his chest, an emotion he hadn't experienced in a long time. There in that simple living room, he found something that all his money couldn't buy: purpose. The waiting room at Northwestern Memorial Hospital seemed even more imposing seen through Emily's eyes. Sitting between her mother and Michael, she watched the comings and goings of doctors and nurses, their impeccable white clothes contrasting with the gleaming marble floor. "Mrs. Walker," called the receptionist, "Dr. Anderson is ready to see you." Sarah instinctively squeezed Emily's hand. 3 days had passed since Michael Harrison's unexpected visit, and now they were here, in the best hospital in the city, about to consult one of the most renowned specialists in autoimmune diseases in the country. "Can I go with you, Mom?" Emily asked, her eyes revealing a mixture of anxiety and protection. "Better you stay here with Michael," Sarah responded softly. "I promise to tell you everything afterward." Michael, who had been discreetly silent, until then agreed with a gesture. "Don't worry, Emily, I'll take good care of our little warrior." As Sarah followed the receptionist down the corridor, Emily sank into the leather armchair, her legs swinging without reaching the floor. Michael noticed her discomfort. "Want to take a walk?" he suggested. "There's a cafeteria on the ground floor with the best brownies in the city." Emily hesitated. "But what if my mom comes back and doesn't find us?" "Rachel is outside," Michael reassured her. "She'll let us know if your mom returns." On the way to the cafeteria, Emily remained unusually silent. Michael had already learned in these few days that when she got like this, something important occupied her thoughts. "A penny for your thoughts," he joked, as they sat at a table near the window. Emily played with the napkin for a moment before responding. "The people in the building where you live, they were talking about us." Michael frowned. "What do you mean?" "This morning when we arrived, I heard 2 women whispering," she continued. "Look at that. Harrison's now become a father to the poor," one of them said. Emily's frankness caught him off guard. It was true that his sudden closeness to a humble family had generated buzz in the corporate building, but he hadn't imagined the girl would notice this. "Emily," Michael began, carefully choosing his words, "some people have the terrible habit of judging what they don't know. Does that bother you?" "Not for me," she replied, surprising him again with her maturity. "But I don't want them to speak ill of you because of us." Michael felt something tighten in his chest. Here was a 9-year-old child worried about his business reputation. "Let me tell you a secret." He leaned over the table. "For the last 15 years, these same people called me Harrison, the Ice Heart. And you know what? They were right." Emily's eyes widened. "But you don't have an ice heart." "Not now," he smiled. "Thanks to a certain girl who taught me the value of small things." The waitress approached with a tray containing 2 brownies and 2 glasses of orange juice. Michael hadn't even needed to place an order. It was already the 3rd consecutive day they had come here. "Mr. Harrison," Emily called after savoring a piece of the treat, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you never have children?" The question hit him like a punch to the stomach. Images of Laura, his ex-wife, came to his mind. The discussions about starting a family, his arguments about timing and professional priorities. He hesitated. "I guess I was too busy trying to prove something to myself." "And now," Emily insisted, "are you still?" Before Michael could answer, Rachel appeared hurriedly in the cafeteria. "Mr. Harrison, Sarah is returning to the reception," she informed. "And there's a situation at the office that requires your urgent attention." Michael checked his cell phone, noticing the several missed calls. The reality of his position was knocking at the door again. "Let's go, Emily." He stood up. "Your mum must be waiting for us." In the elevator, Emily spontaneously held his hand, a gesture she had started to do in the last few days, and that somehow warmed his heart. They found Sarah in the reception, her face marked by tears, but a discreet smile on her lips. "Mom?" Emily ran to her. "Is everything okay?" Sarah hugged her daughter, looking over her head at Michael. The doctor said we started the treatment in time. Her voice choked with emotion. With the right medication, I can have a normal life in a few months. Emily jumped for joy, hugging her mother first, and then, to everyone's surprise, Michael. "Thank you, Uncle Michael," she exclaimed, using the more informal address for the first time. Michael felt his eyes water, something that hadn't happened in years. But before he could respond, his cell phone vibrated again. "I'm sorry," he said, checking the message. "I have an emergency at the office." "Go ahead," Sarah smiled understandingly. "You've already done more than we could have dreamed of." As he said goodbye, Michael realized that Emily's question still echoed in his mind. "And now, are you still?" The answer, he realized, was changing with each day he spent with that small family that fate had placed in his path. A month passed since the beginning of Sarah's treatment. The small suburban house gradually gained new life, as did its resident. The flower pots in the window now overflowed with colors, and the sewing machine was working again, albeit for short periods. On that Sunday afternoon, the house was especially bustling. Michael had invited mother and daughter for lunch at his penthouse, and Emily had been talking about nothing else for days. "Mom, are you sure you don't want me to help you choose your outfit?" Emily asked for the third time, already dressed. In her best dress, a gift Michael had brought the week before. Sarah smiled, observing her daughter through the mirror while combing her hair. The last treatment sessions had restored part of her natural color, and she could now get ready on her own. "Do I look okay?" she asked, smoothing the simple blue dress she had sewn especially for the occasion. "You look beautiful, Mom," Emily exclaimed. "Uncle Michael will love it." Sarah blushed slightly at her daughter's comment. In recent weeks, she had noticed Michael's increasingly frequent visits, always with some excuse, checking on how the treatment was going, bringing a new book for Emily, discussing possible partnerships with sewing ateliers. The intercom rang punctually at noon. It was Rachel, Michael's assistant, who had come to pick them up. "Mr. Harrison apologizes for not coming personally," Rachel explained as she led them to the car. "He had a last-minute commitment, but he's already on his way back home." Emily, who in recent times had developed an almost fraternal admiration for Rachel, began to bombard her with questions about Michael's penthouse. Sarah, however, noticed something different in the assistant's tone. When they arrived at the luxurious building in the Gold Coast area, they were greeted by the doorman and led to the private elevator. Emily could barely contain her excitement. "Mom, look at the view," she exclaimed as soon as the doors opened. Directly into the penthouse. The apartment was impressive, with floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a panoramic view of Chicago. But what caught Sarah's attention was the minimalist, almost impersonal environment. There were no family photos, just some contemporary artwork on the walls. "This way, please." Rachel guided them to the dining room, where the table was exquisitely set for 4 people. "4?" Sarah asked, curious. Before Rachel could answer, the elevator doors opened again. Michael entered, accompanied by an elegant woman who appeared to be about 40 years old. "Sarah, Emily," he smiled, but there was tension in his face. "I want to introduce you to Laura, my ex-wife." The silence that followed was heavy. Laura advanced with a studied smile, her high heels echoing on the marble floor. "So these are your protégés," she commented, her tone oscillating between curiosity and disdain. Emily, usually so talkative, instinctively moved closer to her mother. Sarah maintained an upright posture. Years of adversity had taught her to maintain dignity in uncomfortable situations. "It's a pleasure to meet you," Sarah responded politely. Michael seemed uncomfortable, alternating his gaze between the 2 women. "Laura was passing through the city and asked to meet us," he explained, as if feeling the need to justify his ex-wife's presence. "Actually," Laura interrupted, "I came because we need to talk about the future of the company, Michael. Your recent investments have been worrying the board." Sarah felt the blow in the subtext. She realized that she and Emily were the investments in question. "This is not the time, Laura," Michael responded, his voice taking on a tone that Emily had never heard before. "When will it be then?" Laura insisted. "When you've donated half the company to charity. The shareholders are nervous, Michael. Your sudden social projects, Your absences from important meetings. Uncle Michael, Emily gently interrupted, surprising everyone. Is she the person in the photo? What photo, dear? Laura asked, her tone softening as she addressed the girl. The one Uncle Michael keeps in the drawer of his office desk, Emily replied. He looks at it sometimes when he thinks no one is watching. Michael paled slightly. Laura seemed to momentarily lose her composure. Emily, Sarah called, feeling the tension in the air. I think we'd better leave. No, Michael and Laura said simultaneously, surprising each other. Please stay, Michael pleaded. Laura and I can talk another time. Actually, Laura said, her tone subtly changing, I'd really like to get to know you better, if you don't mind. There was something different in her voice now, something that sounded almost like genuine curiosity. Sarah hesitated, but it was Emily who made the decision. Do you like brownies? She asked innocently. Because Uncle Michael says the ones. Here are the best in the city. An involuntary smile appeared on Laura's lips. He always had a weakness for brownies, she commented, exchanging a meaningful look with Michael. As they sat at the table, the initial tension began to gradually dissipate. Rachel, who was discreetly observing everything, allowed herself a small smile before withdrawing. Perhaps she thought this lunch wouldn't be a complete disaster after all. What none of them knew was that this unexpected encounter would be just the beginning of a series of events that would test the newly formed bonds between them, forcing each one to confront their own prejudices and fears. The lunch proceeded, in a surprisingly pleasant atmosphere, considering its turbulent start. Laura, to everyone's amazement, seemed genuinely interested in the stories Emily told about her return to school and how her mother was regaining strength to sew. So you're a seamstress? Laura asked Sarah as they savored dessert. Michael mentioned something about dresses. I was, Sarah corrected gently. Now I'm trying to get back to it little by little. My mom made the most beautiful dresses. Emily intervened enthusiastically. Important people used to buy only from her, you know? Laura raised an eyebrow, interested. What kind of dresses? Mainly party dresses and some custom pieces, Sarah replied, a nostalgic gleam in her eyes. I worked for some boutiques in the Gold Coast area. Sarah has an extraordinary talent, Michael commented, speaking for the first time in several minutes. I was thinking of helping her set up her own atelier when she's fully recovered. Laura set down her fork, studying Michael with a look that mixed surprise and something more, something close to understanding. That's why, isn't it? She asked, softly. That's why you've changed so much in recent weeks. Michael met her gaze. What are you talking about? You found a purpose, Laura replied. Something you searched for during all the years we were married. A dense silence fell over the table. Emily looked from one adult to another, feeling the importance of the moment, even without fully understanding it. Uncle Michael, she called, breaking the tension. Can I show Aunt Laura the book you gave me? Michael nodded, grateful for the interruption. Emily ran to her backpack, which she had left on the living room sofa. Aunt Laura? Sarah murmured, raising an eyebrow at Michael. He shrugged, a small smile on his lips. Emily has this gift of breaking down barriers. Laura observed the interaction between them with renewed interest. You know, Michael, she began, when I received the calls from board members, I came prepared for a battle. They're convinced you're having some kind of midlife crisis. And now? He asked, his voice calm but firm. Now? Laura hesitated, watching Emily, who was running back with a book in her hands. Now I understand. Look, Aunt Laura. Emily enthusiastically extended the book. It's about a girl who wanted to be an astronaut. Laura took the book, carefully, leafing through it. I knew this book, she commented, her voice soft. It was one of my favorites when I was a child. Really? Emily's eyes widened. Uncle Michael said it was special, but he didn't know why. Michael and Laura exchanged a meaningful look. There were stories there, shared memories that Sarah could only imagine. Actually, Laura began, it was with this book that your Uncle Michael asked me to be his girlfriend a long time ago. He knew it was my favorite. Emily looked at Michael in wonder. Is that true? He nodded, a melancholic smile on his lips. Some stories have the power to connect people even after a long time. Like you and us, Emily exclaimed, making all the adults smile. Laura gently closed the book, her countenance changing to something more determined. Michael, I think I have a proposal for you and Sarah. Sarah, who had been silently observing, straightened in her chair. You know that besides my stake in Harrison Tech, I have a chain of party dress stores, Laura continued, and we're always looking for unique talents for our collections. Sarah's eyes widened, beginning to understand where Laura was going. I'm proposing a partnership, Laura declared. A space in my stores for an exclusive line of dresses signed by you, Sarah, with all the necessary support for production and promotion. Michael leaned forward, surprised. Laura, are you sure? I've never been so sure, she responded firmly, and this should calm the board too. It will no longer be just philanthropy, it will be a commercial investment with real potential for return. Sarah felt her eyes water. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Mom. Emily jumped in her chair. You've always dreamed of having your own brand. Laura smiled at the girl. Your daughter is a great negotiator, Sarah. She is, Michael agreed, looking fondly at Emily. She changed all our lives, didn't she? The afternoon sun was streaming through the large windows of the penthouse, bathing the room in golden hues. At that moment, something new began to form there. Not just a business partnership, but an intricate web of relationships that none of them could have predicted weeks ago. So, Laura raised her water glass. A toast to new beginnings? Everyone raised their glasses, including Emily with her grape juice. The clinking of crystal echoed through the room, sealing not just a business deal, but also the start of a new phase in all of their lives. The small atelier in the Gold Coast neighborhood was unrecognizable on that Thursday morning. Modern sewing machines lined the newly painted walls, mannequins displayed dresses in various stages of production, and a large cutting table occupied the center of the space. In the corner, a discreet sign announced, Sarah's Atelier, exclusive, collection. Mom, more fabric arrived, Emily announced excitedly, watching the delivery men unload boxes of Italian silk and French lace. Sarah, who was adjusting the final details on a pink party dress, looked up from her work. 2 months had passed since that lunch in Michael's penthouse, and her life had taken a complete turn. Emily, dear, can you check if everything came according to the list? She asked, smiling as she watched her daughter immediately grab the clipboard and start checking items with adorable seriousness. Laura entered the atelier at that moment, as elegant as ever in her grey tailored suit. How are we doing with the deadlines? She asked, but her tone was more curious than demanding. Mrs. Martinez's dress will be ready today, Sarah replied, turning her attention back to the details of the piece. And I've already started the sketches for the spring collection. Laura approached to examine the dress, her eyes shining with approval. Sarah, this is simply stunning. Mom barely slept to finish the embroidery, Emily commented, still busy with her list. Laura and Sarah exchanged a concerned look. You can't overdo it, Laura warned. The doctor was clear about the limits. I'm fine, Sarah assured. Actually, I've never felt better. It's different when we do what we love. The sound of the elevator announced another visitor. Michael entered, carrying a box of sweets and a folder of documents. Uncle Michael! Emily dropped her clipboard and ran to hug him. I brought brownies for my favorite assistant, he smiled, handing the box to Emily. And some news for your mum. Sarah and Laura approached, curious. Michael opened the folder on the cutting table. The response to the first dresses has exceeded expectations, he began. 3 fashion magazines want to do features on the atelier, and we already have a considerable waiting list. Sarah felt her legs weaken slightly. Laura quickly pulled up a chair for her to sit down. It's a lot of responsibility, Sarah murmured. It's recognition of your talent, Laura gently corrected. You're ready for this. And you're not alone, Michael added. We have an entire team to support you. Emily, who was observing everything while savoring a brownie, approached her mother. Mom, remember what you always told me? That dreams are like dresses. We make one stitch at a time. The 3 adults looked at the girl in surprise. Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. When did you get so wise, my little one? She asked, hugging her daughter. I learned from the best, Emily. replied, leaving a small chocolate stain on her mother's face as she kissed her. Laura discreetly checked her watch. I need to go. I have a meeting with the buyers in half an hour. I need to get back to the office too, Michael commented. Emily, don't forget your English lesson later. The driver has already been notified, Laura assured. I can pick her up afterward if you want, Michael. I have to pass near the school anyway. Sarah observed the interaction between the two with interest. In recent months, Laura and Michael had developed a new form of relationship, lighter and friendlier than in the last years of their marriage. Uncle Michael, Emily called before they left, are you coming for dinner at our house today? Mom is making that lasagna you love. Michael looked at Sarah, who nodded with a smile. I wouldn't miss it for anything, he replied. After they left, Emily returned to her clipboard, but stopped when she saw her mother staring fixedly at the pink dress. What is it, Mom? I was thinking, Sarah replied softly, about how life takes unexpected turns. A few months ago, I could barely get out of bed, and now you're a famous designer, Emily completed proudly. It's not just that, Sarah smiled, pulling her daughter close. We found a family, didn't we? Emily hugged her mother, taking care not to stain the dress with her chocolate-covered fingers. The best family in the world, she declared with conviction. The rest of the afternoon passed in a tranquil rhythm of work. The pink dress was finished, new sketches were drawn, and plans were made. But the most important thing happened in the small moments, in the smiles exchanged between mother and daughter, in the caring messages Michael sent asking if they needed anything, in the professional tips Laura shared over the phone. It was, as Emily had said, one stitch at a time a dream was being sewn. And like any good dress, every detail mattered, each moment adding something special to the fabric of their lives. The news arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, when the atelier was buzzing with preparations for the first fashion show of Sarah's collection. Rachel entered hurriedly, holding her tablet with a worried expression. Sarah, she called, her voice tenser than usual. We need to talk. Emily, who was organizing the dress sketches for the show, looked up curiously. In recent months, she had developed an incredible ability to sense when something important was about to happen. Did something happen to Uncle Michael? She asked, putting the papers aside. Rachel hesitated, looking from Emily to Sarah. Actually, it's about your father, Emily. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah, who was adjusting the fit of a dress on a mannequin, froze in place. What do you mean? Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. Rachel took a deep breath before continuing. When Mr. Harrison decided to help you, he asked me to do a complete background check on the family to ensure we had all the necessary information for the medical treatment. Emily moved closer to her mother, instinctively holding her hand. During the research, Rachel continued, we discovered that Emily's father is looking for you. He saw the report about the atelier in last month's fashion magazine. Sarah sat, heavily in the nearest chair. No, she murmured. He can't. Mom? Emily called, worried. Who is my father? Before Sarah could answer, the atelier door opened again. Michael entered, his normally controlled face showing signs of concern. I came as soon as Rachel notified me, he said, approaching Sarah. Why didn't you tell me you were investigating? Sarah asked, a hint of hurt in her voice. Michael knelt beside her chair. Because I promised myself that I would only bring up the subject if it was absolutely necessary, and now it is. He wants rights to Emily, Rachel completed softly. He's claiming he never knew about his daughter's existence. Emily, who was observing everything with wide eyes, finally found her voice. But I don't want another father. I already have Uncle Michael. The innocent comment affected everyone present in different ways. Michael felt his heart tighten. Sarah let out a stifled sob, and Rachel disguised an emotional smile. Sweetie, Sarah began, pulling Emily close. A long time ago, before you were born, I met a man named Richard. He was different when we were alone. When I found out I was pregnant and told him, he left, Emily completed simply. Like Julia's dad in my class. Yes, Sarah confirmed, surprised by her daughter's maturity. But now he's back saying he wants to meet you. Michael stood up, his expression determined. He doesn't have that right, not after 9 years. Legally, Rachel intervened. He can request a paternity test and... No, Emily exclaimed, surprising everyone with her vehemence. I don't want to do any test. I don't want to meet him. Emily, Sarah called softly. Sometimes we need to face... No, Mom, Emily interrupted, tears starting to roll down her face. You've always taken care of me alone. And now we have Uncle Michael, Aunt Laura, Aunt Rachel. This is our family. He's nothing to us. Michael exchanged a significant look with Rachel, who nodded discreetly. Sarah, he called gently. There's something I need to tell you about Richard. Sarah looked up, apprehensive. He's not interested in Emily, Michael continued, his voice laden with disgust. He saw the success of the atelier, the reports, the money. Rachel discovered that he has a history of financial scams. Sarah covered her mouth with her hands, horrified. Emily hugged her mother tightly. I won't let him, Michael declared firmly. I won't let him hurt you. We won't let him, a new voice joined the conversation. Laura was standing at the atelier door, as elegant as ever in her navy blue dress. Aunt Laura! Emily ran to hug her. I came as soon as Michael called me, Laura explained, hugging the girl. And I brought this. She held up a folder. These are the documents to file for joint custody. What? Sarah asked, confused. If you agree, Laura explained, Michael can file for joint custody of Emily. This would make it harder for Richard to claim any rights over her. You really want to be my dad? Emily asked Michael, her eyes shining with hope. Michael felt his vision blur with unshed tears. Sweetie, I already am your dad. We just need to put it on paper. Sarah watched the scene, her heart a mixture of emotions. You would do that? Take on that responsibility? Sarah, Michael smiled, I took on that responsibility the day I saw a little warrior collecting cans in front of my building. I just didn't know it yet. Laura approached, placing the folder on the table. You don't have to decide now, but the sooner we act... I want to, Emily declared with conviction. I want Uncle Michael to be my real dad. Sarah looked at her daughter, then at Michael, and finally at Laura and Rachel. There were the people who had transformed her life in recent months, who had proven that family goes far beyond blood ties. Then, she smiled through tears, I guess we have one more reason to celebrate after the fashion show. Michael hugged Emily, who was beside herself with happiness. Laura discreetly wiped away a tear while Rachel began to organize the necessary documents. The dress on the mannequin swayed slightly with the breeze coming through the atelier window, its sequins sparkling in the late afternoon light. As Sarah always said, life was indeed like a dress. Sometimes we need to undo some stitches to create something even more beautiful. The grand ballroom of Chicago's most luxurious hotel was packed. Soft lights illuminated the runway, where, in a few minutes, the first official collection of Sarah's atelier would be presented. Backstage, the movement was intense. Mom, look! Emily exclaimed, twirling in her dress made especially for the occasion, a lilac model with small butterflies hand-embroidered. It matches yours. Sarah, wearing a long dress of the same color, but with a more sophisticated design, smiled at her daughter. 6 months had passed since that tense afternoon in the atelier, and much had changed. Are you nervous? Laura asked, approaching with a clipboard in her hands. As creative director of the partnership, she had dedicated herself intensely to ensure everything would be perfect. A little, Sarah admitted, but it's a good kind of nervousness. People are already arriving, Rachel announced, entering backstage. And there's a special surprise waiting for you in the front row. Emily ran to peek through the curtain, letting out an exclamation of joy when she saw who was there. Mrs. Johnson, and everyone from our old street. Indeed, occupying places of honor in the front row were all the neighbors who had helped Sarah and Emily in their most difficult moments. Michael had insisted on inviting them and providing transportation for everyone. It's almost time, Laura gently alerted. Sarah, do you want to give the models one last check? As Sarah checked the final details of each dress, Michael entered, backstage, elegant in his dark suit. Dad! Emily ran to hug him. The word still sounded new on her lips, but it carried all the love in the world. The joint custody hearing had taken place a month earlier, and Richard, when confronted with evidence of his true intentions, disappeared as quickly as he had appeared. "How are my girls?" Michael asked, hugging Emily and smiling at Sarah. "Ready," Sarah replied, and everyone realized she was referring to much more than just the fashion show. The lights in the ballroom dimmed, indicating the start of the event. Laura gave the last commands through her headset, while Rachel organized the order of presentations. "Before we begin," Michael called, gathering everyone in a circle, "I want to say something." Emily squeezed her mother's hand while Laura and Rachel came closer to listen. "A year ago, I was known as Ice Heart Harrison," he began, his voice choked with emotion. "I lived surrounded by luxury and power, but completely empty inside. Then on a Saturday morning, a little warrior changed everything." Sarah discreetly wiped away a tear, while Emily smiled radiantly. "Today," Michael continued, "we're not just launching a dress collection, we're celebrating how love can transform lives, how a family can be born in the most unexpected places, and how dreams are like dresses," Emily completed, making everyone smile. "We make one stitch at a time." "Exactly," Laura agreed, her eyes shining with emotion. "And this family still has many stitches ahead." The sound of the first chords of music indicated it was time to begin. Sarah hugged her daughter one last time before taking her position. "Remember what you told me that first day?" Emily asked Michael as they prepared to enter the ballroom. "Today will be different?" "I remember," he smiled, "and it was much more different than I could have imagined." The first model entered the runway, wearing a stunning dress that blended Sarah's refined technique with the innovation that Laura so valued. The audience sighed in approval. Backstage, Rachel smiled as she watched the family gathered. Not the family one might expect, but the family that destiny had woven with the most precious threads of love and perseverance. The fashion show unfolded like a dream. Each dress told a story of overcoming, of love, of new beginnings. When Sarah entered for the final thanks, hand in hand with Emily on one side and Michael on the other, Laura right behind, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Mrs. Johnson, from the front row, cried openly as she applauded. She, more than anyone, knew where that family had come from and how much they had achieved. Later, during the celebration, while Emily danced with Michael and Laura animatedly conversed with international buyers, Sarah had a moment of reflection. "What are you thinking about?" Rachel asked, offering her a glass of champagne. "About how surprising life is," Sarah replied, observing her family. "You know, Rachel, I used to think I was alone in this world, that I had to be strong just for Emily. But I discovered that sometimes we need to let people into our lives. And sometimes," Rachel completed, "the right people appear exactly when we need them most." Emily approached running, her cheeks flushed from dancing. "Mom, Dad, come dance with us." Michael and Laura joined them, and soon the small group was dancing and laughing together, oblivious to the curious glances from the guests. In the Chicago sky, the stars shone with special force that night, as if even they knew that sometimes the greatest miracles begin with the simplest gestures, like a brave girl collecting cans, a businessman rediscovering his humanity, and the unconditional love of a mother. And so, amidst laughter and dances, that special family celebrated not just the success of a fashion collection, but the victory of love over prejudice, of hope over fear, and the strength that exists in every new beginning.